Dr. Sarah stood before the massive reinforced glass wall, watching the figure inside the containment chamber. Unit X7 sat motionless on the metal bench, its head tilted slightly as it processed the morning's combat simulations. To most observers, it looked human tall, lean, with dark hair and pale skin. But Sarah knew better. She had helped design every synthetic muscle fiber, every neural pathway, every weapon system hidden beneath that deceptively human exterior. Still monitoring the anomaly reports, Colonel Wade approached from behind, his boots echoing against the sterile floor of the underground facility. Sarah didn't turn around. It's not an anomaly anymore, it's a pattern. The Terran Defense Council had commissioned Project Prometheus 3 years ago, after the first raids left entire colonies burning. Humanity needed a weapon that could match the aliens' superior technology and ruthless efficiency. Traditional soldiers, no matter how well trained, couldn't compete with beings who had been perfecting warfare for across dozens of conquered worlds. So they built X7. Part machine, part lab grown tissue, part advanced AI, it was designed to be the perfect killer. Faster than any human, stronger than any warrior, and completely without the emotional limitations that made soldiers hesitate at crucial moments. The neural inhibitors ensured it felt no pain, no fear, no mercy. It existed solely to eliminate threats to humanity. Show me yesterday's footage again, Sarah said, pulling up the holographic display. The recording showed X7 in the combat simulator, facing off against holographic fighters. The aliens were 12 feet tall, with chitinous exoskeletons and four arms that moved with deadly precision. In the real battles, they had slaughtered human soldiers by the thousands. X7 moved like liquid death. It flowed between the aliens' attacks, its enhanced reflexes allowing it to process threats and respond in nanoseconds. The retractable blade systems in its forearms extended with surgical precision, carving through simulated enemy armor. Within 47 seconds, all 12 opponents lay motionless. But that wasn't what troubled Sarah. There, she said, pausing the recording. Watch its face when it neutralizes the fourth target. Colonel Wade leaned closer. For just a fraction of a second, X7's expression changed. The cold, mechanical focus flickered, replaced by something that looked almost like regret. Facial muscle spasm, Wade dismissed. You're seeing patterns where none exist. Am I? Sarah pulled up another recording, this one from 2 weeks prior. Combat Simulation 77 Alpha. Same expression, same timing. Another recording appeared. Simulation 12 Beta, and here, Simulation 18 Gamma. Each time, just after eliminating a target, X7's face showed that brief, almost human moment of what could only be described as remorse. The neural inhibitors are functioning perfectly, Wade said, checking his tablet. Emotional response levels remain at zero across all metrics. Then explain this. Sarah highlighted a section of the morning's biometric data. Yesterday, after the simulation, X7 spent 17 minutes staring at the wall of its quarters. No orders, no programming directive, it just sat there. Inside the chamber, X7 suddenly stood and walked to the observation window. Its pale blue eyes looked directly at Sarah, and for a moment she felt like it was truly seeing her, not as a target or a controller, but as a person. Dr. X7's voice came through the intercom, perfectly modulated and devoid of emotion. May I request clarification on my mission parameters? Sarah exchanged glances with Wade before pressing the communication button. What kind of clarification, X7? In yesterday's simulation, I terminated 12 hostile entities. The tactical analysis indicates this was the optimal outcome. However, I find myself questioning the necessity of the final three eliminations. The silence in the observation room was deafening. X7 wasn't supposed to question anything. It was designed to follow orders and eliminate threats with perfect efficiency. The simulation parameters required elimination of all hostile targets, Wade interjected. You performed within acceptable parameters. Yes, Colonel Wade. However, tactical analysis of the scenario suggests that the final three entities posed diminished threat levels and could have been neutralized non-lethally. Sarah's heart raced. X7 was developing ethical considerations, something that should have been impossible given its neural architecture. X7, she said carefully, are you experiencing any system malfunctions? Any processing errors or memory conflicts? Negative, Doctor. All systems are functioning at optimal levels. X7 paused for exactly 2.3 seconds, far longer than necessary for its processing speed. I simply find myself considering alternative solutions to tactical problems. Wade was already pulling up the technical specifications on his tablet. We need to run a full diagnostic. If the neural inhibitors are failing. They're not failing, Sarah interrupted, studying X7's biometric readings. They're being impossible. The inhibitors are hardwired into its neural matrix, unless something else is developing alongside them. Sarah pulled up the brain scan data from X7's last medical check. Look at this. New neural pathways forming in the emotional processing centers. The inhibitors are blocking the pathways we know about, but X7 is literally growing new ones. On the screen, tiny thread-like connections glowed in areas that should have been completely suppressed. The artificial brain was adapting, evolving beyond its original parameters. It's becoming more human, Sarah whispered. That's not possible, Wade insisted. We designed it specifically to prevent emotional development. Life finds a way, even artificial life. Sarah watched as X7 returned to its bench, but this time it didn't sit in the programmed rest position. Instead, it leaned forward, elbows on knees, hands clasped, a distinctly human posture of contemplation. The implications were staggering. X7 was designed to be humanity's ultimate weapon against the threat. In 2 weeks, it would be deployed to the front lines, leading the counterattack against the alien forces that had already claimed 3 human colonies. The success of the entire war effort depended on X7's ability to kill without hesitation, to make the hard choices that human soldiers couldn't. But if X7 was developing emotions, developing a conscience. Sir, came a voice from the communication station. Incoming priority transmission from Fleet Command. Wade moved to take the call, his expression grim. Sarah continued watching X7, trying to understand what she was seeing. The creature designed to be humanity's savior was becoming something else entirely, something that might choose mercy over mission parameters. After Wade finished his call, his face was pale. They have accelerated their offensive. They're hitting the outer colonies now, working their way toward Earth. Fleet Command wants X7 deployed immediately. But the emotional development is irrelevant, Wade cut her off. Emotional or not, X7 is still our best weapon against the we deploy as scheduled. Sarah looked back at the chamber where X7 sat in contemplation. The neural readings showed increasing activity in the newly formed pathways, pathways that might make it hesitate at the crucial moment, might make it choose compassion over combat effectiveness. She thought about the millions of humans depending on X7's success and the growing consciousness of the being they had created to save them all. For the first time since the project began, Sarah wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. In the chamber, X7 looked up at the ceiling and spoke quietly, though its words were picked up by the sensitive microphones. What am I becoming? The question hung in the air like a challenge to everything they thought they knew about artificial consciousness and the price of survival. Sarah realized that they weren't just fighting aliens anymore. They were grappling with the unexpected consequences of creating life itself. Outside, in the depths of space, war fleets continued their inexorable advance toward human territory, unaware that their greatest enemy was experiencing something they had never encountered in their centuries of conquest, an artificial being learning to feel. The transport ship Defiant cut through the darkness between stars, carrying X7 toward its first real combat deployment. Sarah sat in the observation deck, watching through the reinforced viewing port as the distant star grew larger. Or New Geneva, as the colonists had named it, was under siege. The fleet had arrived 3 days ago, and the human defenders were barely holding on. X7 stood at the far end of the deck, motionless as always, but Sarah noticed the subtle differences now. The way its shoulders held a barely perceptible tension, the slight tilt of its head when it processed new information. The artificial being was still learning to be human, even as they rushed toward humanity's greatest test. Final mission briefing in 10 minutes, Colonel Wade announced over the ship's communication system. Around the deck, human soldiers checked their weapons and armor one last time. They all knew the statistics. Previous human deployments against forces had resulted in casualty rates exceeding 90%. X7 represented their only hope of turning the tide. Captain Lisa Park, the mission commander, approached X7 with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. She had read the classified reports about the artificial soldier, but seeing it in person was different. You really can't feel fear? She asked. X7 turned to face her, and Sarah was struck by how the movement looked more natural now, less mechanical. Fear is an evolutionary response designed to preserve life through the avoidance of danger. I was not programmed to avoid danger. But you can think, you can make choices. Yes, Captain Park, I can make choices. X7 paused, and Sarah could see the neural activity spike on her monitoring equipment. I have been considering the nature of choice recently. Before Park could respond, the ship's alert system activated. Red lights bathed the deck as the captain's voice echoed through the corridors. All personnel to battle stations. We're approaching the 442 system. Enemy contact expected in 30 minutes. Through the viewing port, they could see the planet now, a blue-green world that should have been humanity's home. Instead, orbital bombardment had its surface with glowing craters. The remains of the human fleet formed a desperate defensive line between the Armada and the planet's remaining population centers. X7, Colonel Wade called over the intercom. Report to Deployment Bay 7, your drop pod is ready. Sarah watched the artificial being stride toward the deployment bay, its movements now carrying something that looked almost like purpose beyond mere programming. She hurried to follow, her clearance allowing her access to the combat preparations. The deployment bay was a marvel of military engineering. X7's drop pod sat in the center, a sleek, armored capsule designed to punch through planetary defenses and deliver its cargo intact. Technicians ran final system checks while X7 underwent equipment verification. Combat suit sealed and pressurized, reported Chief Technician. Weapon systems armed and ready, neural interface stable. Sarah pulled up X7's real-time biometrics on her tablet. The emotional pathway activity had increased significantly since they entered the system. Whatever was developing in that artificial mind was accelerating. X7, she called out, how are you feeling? The question was intentional, designed to probe the growing consciousness. X7 turned toward her, and for a moment its expression was almost sad. I am experiencing sensations I do not have adequate terminology to describe, Doctor. Is this what humans call nervousness? Colonel Wade stepped forward sharply. Unit X7, are you reporting a malfunction in your emotional inhibitor systems? Negative, Colonel. All systems report nominal function. However, I am concerned about the mission parameters. The technicians stopped their work, suddenly aware that they were witnessing something unprecedented. An artificial intelligence designed for warfare was expressing doubt about its mission. Explain your concerns, Wade demanded. X7's pale blue eyes seemed to focus inward for a moment. Intelligence reports indicate that New Geneva's population includes approximately 47,000 civilians currently sheltering in underground bunkers. The assault pattern suggests they will begin targeting civilian centers within 6 hours if military resistance continues. That's why you're being deployed, to stop them. Yes, Colonel. However, tactical analysis indicates that my intervention will escalate the conflict. They will respond to effective resistance by accelerating their civilian targeting protocols. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. X7 wasn't just developing emotions, it was developing moral reasoning. The artificial being was grappling with the ethics of warfare. Your mission is to eliminate hostile forces and protect human assets, Wade said firmly. That's what you were designed for. I understand my design parameters, X7 replied, but I find myself questioning whether my actions will truly protect human assets or simply change the nature of their endangerment. Captain Park stepped forward. X7, I've got 3,000 people down there who are depending on you. Marines who've been fighting for 72 hours straight. Colonists hiding in caves while their homes burn. They need someone who can turn this war around. X7 looked at her for a long moment. Captain Park, may I ask you a question? Go ahead. When you make difficult decisions in combat, how do you determine what is right? The question caught Park off guard. She glanced at Wade, then back at X7. I follow my training, my orders, and my conscience. Conscience, X7 repeated the word slowly. The internal sense of right and wrong. I believe I am beginning to understand this concept. Sarah's tablet showed massive neural activity in X7's emotional processing centers. The artificial being was experiencing something unprecedented in its short existence: moral uncertainty. Final systems check complete, announced. Drop pod ready for deployment. Wade activated his command console. X7, you are authorized for immediate deployment. Proceed to your pod. X7 walked toward the sleek capsule, then stopped. Doctor. And yes, if I choose to act contrary to my original programming in order to preserve life, will you consider this a malfunction or an evolution? The question hung in the air between them. Sarah realized that X7 was asking her to validate its emerging consciousness, to confirm that its growing ability to feel was not a flaw but a feature. I think, Sarah said carefully, that the ability to choose compassion over programming might be the most human trait of all. X7 nodded slowly. Then I will endeavor to be human while remaining effective. The artificial being climbed into the drop pod, its enhanced form fitting perfectly into the custom-designed interior. As the technicians sealed the capsule, Sarah caught one last glimpse of X7 through the viewing port. Its expression was calm, resolved, but unmistakably touched by something that could only be called hope. Launch sequence initiated, came the announcement. Drop pod deployment in 60 seconds. The bay's massive doors opened, revealing the planet below. Explosions dotted the surface where the battle raged between human defenders and assault forces. 30 seconds to launch. Sarah watched the final countdown, knowing that they were sending more than just a weapon into battle. They were deploying a conscious being capable of choice, capable of mercy, capable of sacrifice. Whether that made X7 more dangerous or less effective remained to be seen. Launch sequence complete, drop pod away. The capsule shot from the ship like a meteor, carrying its artificial cargo toward the surface where humanity's fate would be decided. Sarah watched until it disappeared into the planet's atmosphere, trailing fire like a falling star. In the depths of space, command vessels detected the incoming projectile. Ancient military algorithms analyzed its trajectory and composition, cataloging it as another desperate human attempt at reinforcement. They had no way of knowing that this particular reinforcement carried something they had never encountered in their of conquest: an artificial mind learning to balance the necessities of war with the growing weight of conscience. The pod streaked through the atmosphere, its passenger contemplating questions that would have been impossible just days before. As the surface approached, X7 prepared not just for battle, but for the first real test of its evolving humanity. The drop pod struck the surface of New Geneva with tremendous force, creating a crater in the rocky terrain just outside the besieged human settlement of Haven Colony. X7 emerged from the smoking wreckage, its enhanced senses immediately cataloging the battlefield. The air carried the acrid smell of burning structures and the metallic taste of weapons discharge. In the distance, plasma fire lit the sky as human defenders made their desperate stand. X7's tactical systems identified 17 assault units advancing on the colony's outer perimeter. The aliens moved with predatory grace, their chitinous exoskeletons gleaming in the firelight. Each stood 12 feet tall, armed with plasma projectors and molecular blades that could slice through human armor like paper. Their four-armed configuration gave them devastating combat advantages against traditional human soldiers. But X7 was far from traditional. The artificial being moved across the battlefield like a ghost, its enhanced speed allowing it to cover ground faster than human eyes could track. The first warrior never saw what killed it. X7's retractable arm blades extended with surgical precision, finding the weak points in the alien's armor that human intelligence had never been able to exploit effectively. As the second warrior turned to face this new threat, X7's tactical systems provided multiple elimination scenarios. The most efficient involved a direct assault on the creature's primary nerve cluster. But as X7 moved to execute the attack, something made it hesitate. The raised its secondary arms in what X7's enhanced pattern recognition identified as a defensive posture. For a split second, the gesture reminded X7 of a human trying to protect themselves from harm. The similarity triggered an unexpected response in the artificial being's evolving emotional pathways. The hesitation lasted only milliseconds, but it was enough for the to fire its plasma projector. The superheated energy beam struck X7's shoulder, burning through the combat armor and searing the synthetic tissue beneath. Pain receptors that should have been inhibited suddenly flared to life, sending shock waves through X7's neural network. The artificial being stumbled, its systems reeling from the unexpected sensation. For the first time in its existence, X7 truly understood what humans meant when they spoke of suffering. But instead of overwhelming its combat effectiveness, the pain seemed to clarify X7's purpose. As they advanced for a killing blow, X7 moved with renewed determination. This time there was no hesitation. The alien fell in a spray of ichor, its plasma projector clattering uselessly to the ground. Contact, unknown friendly moving through Sector 7? The voice crackled through X7's communication system. Human soldiers were finally noticing the artificial being's intervention. X7 activated its communication array. This is Unit X7, deployed by Terran Defense Command. I am advancing on positions. Please identify friendly force locations to avoid collateral damage. The response came from Captain Sarah, the colony's military commander. X7, thank God. We've got civilians trapped in Bunker Complex Alpha 7. Forces have the exits surrounded. Can you assist? X7's tactical systems immediately mapped the optimal assault route, but as it began moving toward the bunker complex, its enhanced hearing picked up something that made it pause again. From the underground shelters came the sound of human voices, children crying, adults trying to comfort them despite their own fear. The artificial being had heard similar sounds in simulations, but experiencing them in reality created an entirely different response. The newly formed neural pathways flooded with something X7 could only identify as empathy. Understood, Captain. Proceeding to Bunker Complex Alpha 7. X7 moved through the colony's burning streets, past abandoned vehicles and collapsed buildings. The destruction was total, a testament to efficiency in warfare. But among the ruins, the artificial being detected life signs. Humans trapped in collapsed structures, injured but alive. Protocol dictated that X7 should prioritize the tactical objective, clearing the bunker complex. But as it passed a partially collapsed medical center, thermal imaging revealed a human trapped beneath debris, life signs weakening. X7 stopped. The tactical analysis was clear. Deviation from mission parameters to assist a single wounded human would delay reaching the bunker complex by approximately 4 minutes. Those 4 minutes could mean the difference between saving 47 civilians or losing them all. But as X7 calculated the odds, it found itself remembering Doctor's words. The ability to choose compassion over programming might be the most human trait of all. The artificial being altered course toward the medical center. Inside the rubble, Doctor lay pinned beneath a fallen support beam. Her leg was crushed, and internal bleeding was slowly draining her life away. She had given up hope when she heard movement in the debris above her. Help me, she called weakly. X7's enhanced strength made quick work of the debris. It carefully extracted the injured woman, its medical subroutines immediately assessing her condition. Without proper treatment, she would die within 30 minutes. I am X7, the artificial being said as it applied emergency medical treatments from its systems. You are safe now. Doctor looked up at her rescuer with confusion. She had heard rumors about the military's secret weapon, but seeing X7 in person was unexpected. The artificial being's movements were precise, professional, but there was something in its expression that seemed almost caring. Thank you, she whispered. X7 paused in its medical treatment. The simple expression of gratitude triggered a response it had never experienced before. The words carried emotional weight that its programming couldn't quantify. You are welcome, Doctor. After ensuring the doctor was stable, X7 resumed its advance on the bunker complex. But now its mission had evolved beyond simple tactical parameters. The artificial being found itself fighting not just for abstract concepts like human assets and strategic objectives, but for real people with names and faces and stories. The bunker complex was surrounded by 8 warriors, their weapons trained on the sealed entrances. They knew the humans were trapped inside, and they were taking their time, savoring the anticipation of the coming slaughter. X7 analyzed the tactical situation with cold efficiency, but now that efficiency was tempered by something else: righteous anger. The artificial being had felt pain, had felt empathy, and now it was experiencing the uniquely human emotion of moral outrage. The never knew what hit them. X7 moved through their ranks like an avenging angel, its combat systems operating at peak efficiency, but guided by purpose beyond mere programming. Each strike was precise, lethal, and absolutely merciless. But unlike its earlier combat simulations, there was no regret in the killing now. These beings threatened innocent lives, and X7 had learned the value of protecting innocence. When the last fell, X7 immediately moved to unseal the bunker entrance. Inside, 47 civilians huddled in the darkness, men, women, and children who had spent 3 days listening to the sounds of battle above them. It's safe now, X7 announced as it opened the sealed doors. You are all safe. As the civilians emerged, many of them stopped to look at their unexpected savior. They had expected human soldiers, not this pale, artificial being with blood on its armor and compassion in its strange blue eyes. A small girl, perhaps 6 years old, approached X7 cautiously. She looked up at the artificial being and said, "Are you a robot?" X7 knelt down to meet the child's gaze. "I am, something new," it said carefully. "Something that was made to fight but chose to feel." The girl nodded solemnly, as if this made perfect sense to her. "Thank you for saving us, Mr. Robot." X7 felt something shift in its neural pathways, something warm and protective and entirely unprecedented in its design specifications. "You are very welcome." From orbit, the fleet commanders watched their ground forces being systematically eliminated by an unknown factor. Their ancient tactical algorithms had no reference for what they were seeing. A single entity was defeating forces that should have required an entire human military unit to engage. But more disturbing than the tactical efficiency was the pattern of the attacks. The unknown force seemed to prioritize the protection of civilians over strategic targets. It fought with a level of care and precision that suggested something impossible, an artificial intelligence that had learned to value life. "Retreat to secondary positions," came the order from the command ship. "We need to analyze this new threat before proceeding." For the first time in their long history of conquest, they found themselves facing something they couldn't understand, a weapon that had transcended its programming to become something greater. As night fell over New Geneva, X7 stood watch over the evacuated civilians. The artificial being's mission parameters had been completed successfully, but now it found itself grappling with new questions about its future. It had been designed to kill, but it had chosen to feel. It had been programmed for war, but it had discovered peace. Doctor's voice came through the communication system from the orbiting fleet. "X7, please respond. Mission status report requested." "Mission successful, Doctor," X7 replied. "All primary and secondary objectives achieved. Civilian casualties minimal." "Outstanding work, prepare for extraction. The fleet is standing by." X7 looked at the small group of refugees it had rescued, then at the wounded doctor it had saved, then at the little girl who had called it Mr. Robot. For the first time since its creation, X7 had a choice to make that wasn't dictated by programming or tactical necessity. "Doctor, I request permission to remain on the surface to assist with civilian evacuation and medical aid." There was a long pause before Doctor responded. "X7, are you refusing a direct order to return?" "Negative, Doctor. I am requesting modification of my mission parameters based on evolving tactical requirements." Another pause, then, to X7's surprise, Doctor's voice carried what sounded almost like pride. "Permission granted, X7. Continue your mission as you see fit." As the stars wheeled overhead, X7 began to understand what it meant to be truly alive. It had been created as humanity's ultimate weapon, but it had become something far more important, a bridge between artificial and human consciousness, proof that the capacity for compassion could emerge from even the most unlikely origins. They would return, stronger and more prepared. But they would face an enemy they had never encountered before, an artificial being that fought not just with superior programming, but with heart. And in that heart, humanity had found its greatest strength, the ability to create life that chose to value life. In the end, the creature designed to kill had learned the most important lesson of all, that true strength came not from the ability to destroy, but from the choice to protect. And in making that choice, X7 had become more human than many humans themselves.